I'm sorry, I got held up. I should have had this ready. Been behind.
That's okay. I mean, we can get by without it. At least you can see us, so you can still be a part of the conversation. You can see what's happening.
I can't see him flip me off, though.
That's all I've been doing the whole time.
Hey everyone, welcome back to this week's episode. And the start of this one sounds a little bit off because last week was the announcement of the death of master distiller Dave Pickerel, who had been behind a lot of brands such as Whistle Pig, Hill Rock, Corsair, and many others. For myself, looking back at this, I didn't have a whole lot of interaction with him, but I did get the opportunity to share the stage with him at Bourbon and Beyond in 2018, where we got to sit there on stage together, literally right next to each other, and talk about the stories of the Russells. So it was an interesting time to be actually able to have that face-to-face communication. I remember actually going to Bourbon and Beyond, seeing him right away, knowing his face because we had done a podcast with him, and being able to shake his hand, and he knew I was right away too. So it was a really cool experience to be able to do that and share that moment with him. And for anybody else that just didn't know Dave, if you want to just know more about him, what he meant to the industry, what he did, what was his life story, we did have a podcast with him. It was back on episode 142, and we titled it "The Man Behind 100 Distilleries." And it probably would have gone even higher than that if he would have stuck around a little bit longer. So prayers go out to his family and friends during this time. Now, another thing that sort of happened and launched this week was a friend of mine named Will Chambers. He just launched a new podcast. So if you're looking for something else to go and listen to, it's called The Lounge with Will Chambers. He's a former ESPN Dallas reporter, and he's an old college friend of mine, as I'd mentioned. And after the recording, he had me on to kind of talk about whiskey and brown water, but his is really focused around things such as sports and culture and all this sort of stuff. So it's going to have a mix of a lot of different things. And just from a personal expression, after the recording, I couldn't believe how amazing he was in front of a microphone. So if you want to get your weekly dose of all these things, including like dating device and just a myriad of topics, I invite you to go and check it out. It's called The Lounge with Will Chambers. It can be found on iTunes as well as any of those other audio-only podcast syndicates, and I will have a link in the show notes as well. This past week, Ryan and I were traveling down to Tennessee to actually pick our next barrels of Pursuit Series releases. So we chose a few different barrels. We're very excited to be able to bring these to you. And we've got the next releases kind of going out here for the next few months. So look forward to that. Check it out, pursuitspirits.com, to see the Cecil Coleman Pursuit Series releases. And you can see how you can get your hands and access on those bottles as well. Now, for the topic of this show, I don't know a bourbon enthusiast that doesn't love Four Roses. It's just one of those things that people always gravitate towards. It goes well with chocolate. It goes well with cigars. It goes well with a lot of different kind of pairings. But this episode goes into some of those random thoughts that we all have. They could be misconceptions behind the mash bills. What's the hype behind certain runs that you hear about people coming out with, like, oh, this certain recipe in this warehouse had really great time in here, or maybe the hype behind some single barrels because they've got some stickers on them. But one of our guests today was recently talking about private picks and holds a lot true for this topic as well. And our other guest today was known as one of the biggest Four Roses fans of all time. So I want to say, first off, thank you to everybody that is subscribing. If you haven't yet, go and check it out. Like I said, you're listening to this on audio. You can check it out on Stitcher, Spotify, iTunes. And if you're more of a video person, you want to see what the interaction looks like between all of us as we are talking, check us out on video too. You can subscribe to us on YouTube as well as Facebook. Now with that, enjoy this week's episode. And here's Fred Minnick with Above the Char.
I'm Fred Minnick, and this is Above the Char. Dave Pickerel. The man was bigger than life and large in posture. He'd walk into a room to promote Whistle Pig, wearing an all-white suit, almost busting at the seams, fully earning his nickname in Whistle Pig's limited edition moniker, Boss Hog. He single-handedly legitimized craft whiskey. In addition to being Whistle Pig's and Hill Rock's master distiller, Pickerel, who, by the way, was the 14-year-long master distiller for Maker's Mark, consulted for more than 100 distilleries. He did so at discount for many, even free for some, and almost always on a handshake. He didn't do contracts. When Pickerel passed away last week, I thought of our many moments together, from sharing drinks at various conferences to our backstage Metallica photo shoot, where I interviewed James Hetfield and Lars Ulrich. Dave and I became friends. I mean, real friends. Once I was struggling to grow my beard, and I asked his advice for how to trim it. The West Point graduate, who has a very similar beard to mine, seemingly knew everything about everything. He gave me a tutorial on how to grow it better and to make it look more fuller than it really was. Professionally, when I had a funky distillation question, I called Dave. Less than a week before his death, Dave and I had this text exchange. Me: what are the flavors you get out of distilling buckwheat? Dave: ugh, yuck. Seriously, buckwheat is very aggressive. It's a very aggressive grain. It pretty much needs to be distilled as light whiskey to be palatable at all. That was our final conversation in this life. Dave lived an interesting life, mostly out of his suitcase and in random hotel rooms, traveling from one distillery to another. In the whiskey geek world, he often caught flack for consulting for so many distilleries. Some suggested he'd do anything for a buck and ridiculed his high prices on Whistle Pig. Little did he know, he often didn't charge upstart distilleries and deliberately issued $500 price tags to avoid his whiskey making it on the secondary market. He once told me he loathed the secondary market so much that he would price above it all the time. Dave was certainly opinionated. But love him or hate him, I cannot think of another distiller in American whiskey who influenced more brands than Dave Pickerel. He was a legend, and I will miss him. And that's this week's Above the Char. Make sure you subscribe to Bourbon Plus magazine to read the feature I wrote about Dave Pickerel and his connection to Metallica. You can subscribe at bourbonplus.com. Until next week, cheers.
Ed Bly and Rising Tide Spirits are back again with a new release of Old Stubborn Bourbon. And this release of Old Stubborn is a premium hand marriage of 10, 11, and 12-year cask strength, barely filtered pot still bourbon. It comes in at a staggering 123.8 proof, and the flavoring grain for this one, which the last one was wheated, but this time it's now rye. Rich, sweet, and bold with a long finish that's sure to be another eye-opener. You can order online at Sealbox or thebourbonconcierge.com, and you can even purchase in person at Revival Vintage Spirits, and even now with very few select stores in Kentucky. You can get it now while you can, but be sure to do it because it's not going to last long.
Play Whiskey Wednesday, Round 11, the memory game. Until June 26, each week you can win one of our 12 incredible grand prizes. Select $2 at checkout. And if they match on drawing night, you'll win that bottle. Not a match? No worries. You still score a Weller 12-year. Every $5 ticket gives you 5 chances to win, including 4 weekly bonus prizes. Get your tickets now at give270.org. Charitable Gaming License ORG 0002703.
Always find what you love at Total Wine & More. With so many great bottles to choose from at the lowest price, it's easy to find your favorite Cabernet or a new single-barrel bourbon to try with some help from one of their friendly guides. And with every bottle comes the confidence of knowing you just found something amazing. With the lowest prices for over 30 years, find what you love and love what you find only at Total Wine & More. Curbside pickup and delivery available in most areas. Visit TotalWine.com to learn more. Spirits not sold in Virginia and North Carolina. Drink responsibly and be 21. Do you ever pour yourself a bourbon, swirl it around, and then start struggling to come up with tasting notes? And perhaps you're also looking for a good Father's Day gift idea. Well, you can now solve both with a kit from Knows Your Bourbon. And unlike other nosing kits on the market, Knows Your Bourbon kits feature real ingredients for the most authentic aromas. You can smell real Tahitian vanilla bean instead of some synthetic aroma that's just made from chemicals. So head on over to knowsyourbourbon.com and enter code BP10 for 10% off your order. From their bar to yours, Chad and Sarah of the popular YouTube channel It's Bourbon Night bring you their favorite at-home old-fashioned mix with the new Elemental Elixir's Golden Hour Syrup. It's a custom-made syrup with notes of bold black tea, warm spices, and orange zest. All you need is your favorite whiskey and ice. No bitters needed. One bottle makes 16 drinks, so that's only $1 a cocktail before you add your own whiskey. They can also be enjoyed in other cocktails or spirits, mocktails, coffee, tea, and anything you can think of. It's crafted locally in Lexington, Kentucky, and you can get your bottle now at whiskeyambitions.com.
Welcome back to the episode of the Bourbon Pursuit Podcast, the official podcast of bourbon. Kenny here with this episode. We're going to be doing something that it's pretty normal to kind of, go up and down the aisles at your local liquor store or be able to find a single barrel Four Roses recipe pretty much anywhere in the nation now. The idea of having a store pick of a single barrel of Four Roses is nothing new that anybody that's into bourbon is accustomed to. But I think there's a lot of things that we have to ask ourselves. Is there a reason that we always maybe gravitate towards one particular recipe? Is there a store that always consistently has better picks or private picks than anyone else? And we're going to sit there, we're going to try to examine what we think each one of these really, all kind of means. We might touch on a little bit of the individual 10 recipes and, maybe some of the flavor notes. Now that I just said that, I think I forgot to run downstairs and actually go get one of my little pamphlets that always come on those Four Roses single barrel picks so I can remember them all and see what I'm looking at. But we'll make it through this. So tonight, we've got two gentlemen that are joining us on the show. One is familiar. The other is somebody else is brand new. So I'll let somebody that's been on the show before go ahead and go first. So Brett, go ahead and take it away. Introduce yourself.
Brent Elliott, contributor at Bourbon Banter, bourbonbanter.com. You can find me at Twitter, at Brett Atlas, or Instagram at Brett Atlas. And I'm thrilled to be here, talk about Four Roses with Travis, who knows as much as anybody.
And that was the segue. That was kind of the segue that we really needed, because there is one person that is sort of known on the Facebook forums as the guy that, he might as well be a protege of Jim Rutledge and all these other people, just because he's got a wealth of knowledge when it just comes to Four Roses stuff. So Travis, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah. Excuse me. My name's Travis Hill. Not anyone special, honestly, just a guy who likes to drink bourbon, and specifically Four Roses. It's really what got me into bourbon. And every time I go there, I have a great time. Done a ton of barrel picks, and it's probably half of my bar and, half of my stash. So I just think for the price, especially, the quality, single barrel, cask strength, I think the everything about it is just great. So it's what I gravitate towards. I love to learn about it, and know a lot of these guys, all like it as well. So it's something that we comes up in conversation quite often, and I just like to learn about it and share the information. So I don't have any social media, except for Facebook, but anytime you're in Louisville, just give me a shout. We'll grab a drink.
Yeah, I'm sure you've got plenty of the recipes on your bar too. But I think, Travis, one good question to ask you is sort of, was it the cask strength single barrel thing that got you into Four Roses, or what was that initial, attraction to it that kind of kept you there and kind of what's kept you hooked?
Yeah, so the first thing I ever had was the 100 proof standard single barrel. And I tried that when I first got into bourbon. It was, Elijah Craig. You just kind of went down the line. And the first time I bought one of those Four Roses, I just loved the flavor. I thought, I didn't really know much about bourbon at the time. I just thought it drank great. I thought the proof was really cool, just full of flavor. So I went through about 5 or 6 bottles of that. And just through Instagram, found a store pick, and I had no clue what I was getting into. So that was a whole adventure for years. Trying hundreds of barrels, trying to figure out what you like. You think you like one recipe, you try another barrel of that same recipe and you don't like it. I mean, I hated Qs forever until this last year, and there's been some incredible OESQ, and I love it. So definitely the variety keeps you in it. You know, all 10 recipes, like I said, each recipe can be different from each barrel to barrel. So, I mean, it's always a new adventure. You find new stuff, new recipes, you know, kind of show themselves in different ways. So, I mean, it's never ending, man. I always am surprised at what I come across.
Well, I think you mentioned a good part right there, talking about the recipes, because we want to definitely touch on those. But Brett, I want to ask you too, what is there something about Four Roses that initially attracted you?
I think that really they do a couple things very, very well. I think that even going back, the single barrels are terrific, and I don't know anywhere else where you have that kind of variety, that you have 10 different recipes and how they can vary so much from bottle to bottle and barrel to barrel, and it just gives you such a great value. I don't know of many that price people out of the market. There's so many of them now. Granted, some of them recently are a little bit younger, but I think, as Travis will probably touch on, in a lot of cases that's even better, depending on how they were aged and what recipe they are. There's some terrific younger ones, and I just think they have a great thing going. And I also think they're limited editions. I mean, I've been critical of a couple of them, but I mean, when you scrape that aside, I mean, who's doing better limited edition blends? And they do one or two a year, and there's a decent amount of them out there. I just think they're doing some great things, and there aren't many brands out there that solid.
So, Travis, I want to ask you, just so we can kind of give a baseline for everybody. How do you know the recipe? So when you see like O and then the letter and then, S and then the letter, like what does it mean? I mean, I know we all know what it means, but just help explain it for those people out there that are maybe just now starting to get into single barrel roses and how they differentiate between, OBSK versus OESQ and stuff like that.
Right. So it's a 4-letter, acronym or combo, whatever you want to call it. The O is always the same and the S is always the same. You have the second letter will either be a E or a B. The E is low rye in the mash bill, which is 20%. It's actually still pretty high for the industry. And then the B would be 35%. So, I mean, a lot of times you get some of these recipes, they taste like rye whiskey almost. And that's another cool thing. So that's a high rye content. And then you have
like a high rye and a higher rye.
High rye and a higher rye. Exactly.
Higher rye,
that's exactly it. And then you have the 5 yeast. There's V, K, O, Q, and F. And they all impart kind of different flavors, and they're not always the same, but they generally kind of stick to similar flavors. The V is, tends to be kind of sweet and creamy and fruity. The K is real spicy, kind of like baking spices, chocolate. The O is kind of berry flavored. Q is floral. F, you get like some tobacco, kind of mint. Can be sweet too. F is really good when it's really sweet. So that's kind of just a quick breakdown.
No, that's good, because for anybody that I got kind of lucky. I was sitting here and I was scrambling. You might have been hearing while Travis was talking. I was actually able to pull the neck tag off of one of the bottles I have next to me, so I'm actually able to talk intelligently when I'm talking about the recipes now. But one of the questions that I did want to run by you, because I personally haven't tried all 10 recipes before. When you look at the back of that neck tag and somebody's walking down the aisle and they get the opportunity and they see it and they say like, oh, OESV is delicate, fruity, fresh and creamy, where OESK is spicy and full body. Do you think there's any one of these that have the tasting notes on the back that aren't necessarily accurate, or do you think what they put on there is pretty much on point?
Yeah, I think they're pretty much on point. I mean, those are kind of like the overarching flavors that you would get. And then each single barrel has, different manifestations of those flavors and then kind of unique flavors. But yeah, I think they're pretty spot on. I mean, they've always been really good about their tasting notes.
And Brett, how many times have you had a full lineup tasting of all 10 recipes side by side?
Not at once. I've done, I wrote a review a long time ago where I did all of the Bs. And then I've been the reason why I didn't go back to do the E's is because I learned too much and I went back and cringed at my first review. So I learned a lot about there's a lot of reviews out there, and I give people a lot of credit for going through the whole lineup. First of all, tasting 10 of anything at once is you're never going to get it. And also going through 10 single barrel picks, you may as well do that 20 different times because you're going to front winner every time.
Right. So there's nothing
and then
that's
throw in doing different barrels too,
It's infinite.
Yes,
and I think, that's just it. You're not going to pigeonhole these things. There's an infinite combination out there, and it's going to be an adventure for your life to figure it all out.
Mm-hmm. So there was actually a question in the chat that Jeremy Kendrick had put out to everybody else in there. It said, so what's your favorite recipe? Some people are saying OESK, some are saying OESQ, OESO. What about you guys? Do you guys have a favorite recipe and why? Brett, I'll let you go first.
I died to hear Travis's answer. I did early on. I had the first one I fell in love with was an 11-year OBSQ. It was the greatest thing I've ever had. I think I only have 1 or 2 bottles left, but it's still my favorite one I've ever had. I can't say it's my favorite though because I've also had bad Qs. I had 2 of them, and then I had another good one. So. Lately, I will tell you, I'm really into the F a lot, primarily because my first F was one I didn't like, so I dismissed it like a fool, and I never went back to it. I missed a lot of good bottles of F I just passed on that were offered to me, but I'm getting back into that now. So my favorite now is probably F because how different it can be. It's not the most consistent, but I think when they're on, they're really good.
What about you, Travis?
Yeah, I mean, F isn't my favorite, but it's OESF definitely can be in my top 5. Like Brett just said, when it's good, it's tough to beat. I always go back to OBSK. I think that's just my favorite. It's so different. It's just big, bold, spicy. You got I love like the cinnamon, chocolate, just big, massive flavors. So that's my favorite. I'm happy to drink, 8 or 9 of them. So there's only a couple I really don't care for. And even then, I've had great barrels of those recipes I don't like. It's just very few and far between.
Right. So I guess
what about you, Kenny?
Well, okay. For me, honestly, I think it's tough for me to provide an answer because I haven't tried so many next to each because I could grab one. I could be like, yeah, that's great. I could grab this one. Yeah, it's great. But I don't sit there and try 3 OESKs next to each other to say like, yeah, this is my jam right here. I honestly don't know what I lean towards. Maybe I fall too much into the hype factor where, if it's got a cool sticker on the side, I'll be like, yeah, this is gonna be a sweet Four Roses pick. Maybe that's what it is. I don't really know. There's been a few things that have said in the chat, like, has anybody really had a bad one? I personally never have. Brett said he has. What about you, Travis? Have you ever had a bad Four Roses pick?
Yeah. But I could probably count them on one hand. And I mean, as many as I've tried, and drinking as many of them as I do, there's a ton of them that are just kind of, but bad, just a few maybe.
You're grading on a curve, though. I mean, and I kind of am too, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look at what Four Roses is able to do and what they put out, to say that, I mean, there's been plenty of off-profile Buffalo Traces, plenty of off-profile Wellers that have been out there. Same thing with some Russells and stuff like that too. But in regards to Four Roses, nothing seems to veer. I mean, they're all really good, but I've never, like I said, really had one that really veered too far off of that typical Four Roses kind of taste. But I don't know. Maybe that's just me.
Yeah. And another thing to point out too is one of the barrels that I don't really like is one that was picked by a group I'm in, and a majority of the people love it. So it's like, okay, it's not my thing, but you guys all love it. That's great. drink it.
And so, when you talk about groups, we talk about epic barrel picks out there. We talk about stickers that kind of garnish a little bit of hype on the markets and stuff like that. When you all look at that, I haven't paid too much attention, but when you all look at that, is there a consistent recipe across the board that it seems that these are the categories that they all fall under, like one or two different recipes?
I think that some of the really solid ones are these, but I think probably because a really good, like an OBSV, even though it's the standard recipe, a really, really good one is good to a lot of people. I think that's one of the reasons why they probably use it as their main single barrel. I think those are exceptional. They don't get too different. They're not too off profile. But I think some of the better ones I've had in the last year or two have been OBSVs, as boring as that may sound.
Well, you, Travis, do you have any kind of thoughts or theories that do any of these usually fall into some particular camp?
Well, what's cool is that over the last couple of years, there's been a real push to get people to taste the barrels blind when they go to pick. And now even Four Roses is getting involved. When you go there now, they turn the barrels around, so you can't even see the recipe. They basically force everybody to taste blind. So I think you used to see a lot of OESK. That was always a group favorite of the private groups. And I don't know if that was just because it was awesome, which it was, but I think it was just that kind of that one recipe that everybody, held really high and really liked. So that one I used to see a lot, and it kind of, but the other thing too is the way that they have these runs, there's a lot of really good barrels of OESQ right now and OESV. So you don't see as much OESK. In fact, there's, if I've gone the last 10 times, I'd say eight of those times I've gone, the OESK was the worst, like bad, just, it shouldn't be there to pick. So it just kind of changes, as time goes on, and, there'll be some OBSK hopefully next year and O's, and it's just kind of like cyclical, I would say.
You kind of took the words out of my mouth and asking if this was cyclical, because it does seem that that question that I had posed to you all at the very beginning about, what's your favorite recipe and why, I think if we would have put that to 10 people, I think, of just, normal everyday kind of bourbon enthusiasts, I bet you probably 7 out of 10 would probably say OESK, right. Just because it's just it's just what's been hot, I think, in the past probably 2 years. And so, kind of move it over to you, Brett. I mean, have you seen some sort of like cyclical turnover where OESKs aren't necessarily coming out near as much anymore from private picks or anything like that?
What's funny about the OESK and even the OBSK is I like them. They've never really been my favorite, and I don't know why that is. But the kind of the ironic thing there is on their own, and I think the Elliott Select I'd put in that category. They're good. They're not great to me, but my favorite limited editions are the ones that are K heavy. So the 2017 and 2015, those were K heavy, and when they're blended, they put something, they add an element that's just incredible. So I like the K and the spice, but I like it mixed with some other recipe. So I'm a bad person to ask about the Ks. I don't love them. I've had a couple that I think are good, but it wouldn't be my first choice.
And Travis, to kind of go along with what you were saying, because you've picked plenty of Four Roses barrels before. What do you see as the typical breakdown of the recipes that are there for your choice? Like, how many barrels are there? How many different recipes do you usually get to go through? And then I got probably a few questions to lead on after that too.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, when I first started going, was it 3 years ago or whatever, you tasted from all 10. That was just the way it was. And then over the last year and a half, it's kind of gotten choppy. Sometimes I've gone and tasted 5, 6, 7, 8, just depends. But now the last, 9 or 10 times, I feel like it's been 7. They have every recipe except for the O's and OBSK. I think they did like 5 OBSK last year and maybe 6 OESOs, no OBSO. So now you go and you generally get seven different recipes.
I mean, were these a lot of these barrels getting pushed towards other projects, or is it just something where they just said like we had a good run of OESK for a while, now we're on this OBSV kick or whatever you had just mentioned, like where you had mentioned it's sort of cyclical, right? So at this time you're going to go through and you're going to get a choice of 7 barrels, 7 different recipes. Maybe it's actually 3 recipes. Like, I don't really know. Right. Is there a turnover rate where you could expect to, not ever get a chance to try more than say 5 recipes, or is it every time you actually get to try 7 different recipes?
Yeah, I think what they try to do is have, for every barrel they have, it's a unique recipe. So like I said, the last, handful of times I've gone, there's 7 barrels, 7 recipes. That's been fairly consistent. So, I mean, they're not going to give you 6 barrels and half of them are OBSV. I mean, you're always going to get different recipes. You may have 8 barrels and, maybe 2 are the same recipe, but they generally try to give you 1 barrel of each recipe. And the reason they don't have the O's and the OBSK is because the bourbon market has exploded. So they're the O's and the K's make up the small batch. They're in the yellow label. So those are their most used recipes. And they maybe just didn't make enough 7 or 8 years ago. So we'll see it all again soon. But right now they just don't have those 3.
Right. Travis hit on something I think that a lot of people may not realize, that the fact that they roll out 7 barrels for you is not common when you go taste barrels in Kentucky. So right. I mean, when you go to Beam or you go to Buffalo Trace, you're not getting 7 barrels. So that's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is an anomaly that they do that. And, Brett, it sounds like you've done this a time or 2 as well. So when you guys usually go and you choose these barrels, is there some recipe that usually comes up as a clear favorite every single time? Or has it been pretty random every time that there's just happens to be a different one that stands out depending on that day?
I think it just depends on what people think that are there, or the group you're with. The recipe is one thing, but there's the barrel makeup, there's the age of it, there's the location. I mean, there's a lot of factors that go into it. And as Travis said earlier, and I've noticed this too, just because the F is supposed to be herbal, it doesn't mean it's not going to come out fruity. And there's just a lot of factors there that can change one recipe into something completely different. So, I don't think I think you make a mistake when you go in with your mind. Like, some people go in saying, God, I hope we get a really good F, or God, I hope we really get a solid Q this time. I mean, you can't do that. You can get some really special barrels out of nowhere, and that's what you're going for. You shouldn't be going with something in mind. I think what's really cool about Four Roses also is, when you have OWA or you have Elijah Craig, you know what the profile is, you know what the standard release is. I think with Four Roses, you know what the OBSV is if you drink the single barrel off the shelf, but you got 10 different recipes. And unless you're Travis or somebody who has done this just dozens and dozens of times, I mean, what's a profile to one person is not to another. So you're definitely going to get different experiences based on who you're with. Right.
Jerry asks as well, have you ever left Four Roses without ever picking a barrel? Because Travis, I know you've done this a time or 2. So is there ever been one time that was just an anomaly?
If you're anything like me, then you can't get enough about bourbon. And that's why I'm a subscriber to Bourbon Plus magazine. Bourbon Plus is a quarterly publication that tells the stories from the heart of bourbon, the farmers who grow the grain, the distillers who labor over the process, and the people like you and me who raise their glasses to celebrate it all. Subscribe to Bourbon Plus magazine today at bourbonplus.com, that's PLUS.com, and use code PURSUIT at checkout for $5 off your subscription. Shopify's already taken the cash register online, helping millions sell billions around the world. But did you know that Shopify can do the same thing at your retail store? Give your point of sale system a serious upgrade with Shopify. Shopify's point of sale is your command center for your retail store. From accepting payments to managing inventory, Shopify has everything you need to sell in person. And with Shopify, you get a powerhouse selling partner that effortlessly unites your in-person and online sales into one source of truth. Track every sale across your business in one place and know exactly what's in stock. Connect with customers in-line and online. Shopify helps you drive store traffic with plug-and-play tools built for marketing campaigns, from TikTok to Instagram and beyond. And get hardware that fits your business. Take payments by smartphone. Transform your tablet into a point-of-sale system, or use Shopify's point-of-sale Go mobile device for a battle-tested solution. Plus, Shopify's award-winning 24/7 help is there to support your success every step of the way. Do retail right with Shopify. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/bourbon, all lowercase, and go to shopify.com/bourbon to take your retail business to the next level today. Shopify.com/bourbon.
Have you ever left Four Roses without ever picking a barrel? Because Travis, I know you've done this a time or two. So is there ever been one time that was just an anomaly?
No, actually. And so to hit on 2 points, I did Captain's 3 last year. And 2 things about that. I wanted a barrel, but I had gone a couple times and wasn't, impressed with what they had. And I was like, man, if I'm buying a whole barrel, I want to get something really good. So I was ready to walk away at that point, but I've never walked away, and I don't know of anybody else that has. They usually come up with something for you. But the funny thing about that pick was I specifically told myself I do not want a Q. That was the one thing I didn't want. I do not want any Q. Lo and behold, we picked a tier 6 OESQ that's just incredible, 124 proof. And it just blew me away. It was clearly the best. There was 5 of us. We all liked it. I mean, it's just like, well, I'm buying a Q because it's awesome. So.
Well, okay. So explain that. Like, why would you go into the mentality of saying you didn't want that? Is just because you've done it plenty of times before, or what was the mentality?
The Q?
Yeah. Well, like why you didn't want the Q?
I just never really liked it. I mean, I've just had it a bunch of times and it never really hit me right. It's the yeast that imparts the least amount of flavor to the bourbon. So it's really all about the barrel with the Qs. And I just never, I don't know. I just was always stuck on the V's, O's, and just kind of didn't really appreciate the Qs. And a lot of times the Qs aren't really good. The employees will tell you, but when they're kind of like off profile, they're awesome. So I just, if I was going to do it, I was like, I want an O or a V or a K or something like that. And, ended up with a Q.
So let's kind of switch gears a little bit, and we'll talk about maybe like some misconceptions that are in the market. So Brett, what do you think is like a misconception of when they look at the barrel pick process, or they look at the barrel picks themselves, or they're going down the aisles and they're trying to figure out, because when you go to say like Liquor Barn or even Total Wine or even those massive ones, they're going to have like 7 or 8 picks of different ones on the shelves of different recipes. So what's like a misnomer that could lead people to choosing something that they typically wouldn't, like, well, how would you guide them in the right direction?
Well, I want to know how the pick was done. I think if you don't know what happened, there's 2 things that, at least in our state here, if they send you samples to a store, you have 2 choices. You either are going to get the 100 proof, and you can pick the 3 samples that they send you, I could be wrong, but my assumption is that by the time those samples get to a store here, that they've been picked through by every barrel picking group and everyone else. And, I don't know how many stores have been offered and rejected those, but you get your pick of 3, but you don't know what 3. So when I see 100 proof store pick, I get concerned. And the other option, though, which is equally scary to me, is if you don't go do the pick down there, they'll give you a barrel proof, but you don't get to pick it. So you let I don't know, it's Brent Elliott sometimes. Sometimes they say picked by the master distiller. Maybe it isn't Brent Elliott. I don't know who's picking it. But I've had picks that were selected by Brent Elliott that I didn't love. And I would feel a lot better if I knew that the person at the store told me, yeah, I went there, this is what we did, this is how I picked it. That's how I would. So at a bare minimum, how I would guide somebody is I would grab the manager and I'd say, can you tell me how this pick was done? That would be my starting point.
Yeah. And Travis, I think you and Brett are pen pals right now. So have you ever, like, when you try stuff that says selected by Brent Elliott, or, it's something that's just at the Four Roses gift shop, what's your kind of mentality going into that? Like, are you attracted to those ones, or are you attracted to something that comes from a barrel picking group or a store that you know of, rather than something that has, Brent Elliott's name on the side of it?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be just straight up honest with you. I don't ever buy bottles in stores anymore, specifically Four Roses barrel picks. It would have to be something that kind of fits into the run that I like if it was like a sister barrel to my barrel, or, just the stats all kind of added up to me, the right recipe, maybe at the right proof, stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, I get excited when I see stuff at the gift shop if it's kind of a recipe I don't usually see there. Or again, I'm all about the runs, so that kind of dictates everything for me. And I have enough Four Roses and tried enough that I'm not really out there trying to take risks. I kind of just buy what I feel like I know that I'm gonna like. It's a educated guess. So, but when I first started, I mean, it was all about buying random bottles, random barrels, and trying it. And you didn't win every time, but I mean, it's kind of just how it is with everything. You got to take a shot and learn.
And
I just want to throw something in really quick, Kenny. I said two things. First of all, Brent Elliott's a good guy, and I have had things that he's picked that I've liked. So I don't want anyone to think that I don't think he's some great stuff.
He's not listening to this, and he's like, that mother.
No, I've traded emails with him. He's a great guy, and I've had things that he's done that are awesome. I just used two examples. I didn't want to leave it with the wrong impression.
Yeah, no, it's okay. I know he listens to this every once in a while too. So he'll so go ahead and give your shout out to him now, and blow some kisses to him if you want.
No, I like him a lot.
You know what? I'll take this time to say a little bit about Brent. People don't give him enough credit. They think he kind of came out of nowhere, but I mean, he's been with the company for probably 10 years now. He worked with Jim Rutledge for years, and he's had a hand in the limited editions for a long time. So I know it's been a bit of a rocky start. I mean, I guess we're past the start at this point, but I just don't think people realize, how long he's been involved and what he actually does. I mean, he literally is the quality control department still to this day. So I think, although the little, some people disagree with his palate or whatever. I mean, that's a whole nother conversation, but he definitely deserves some credit on that end. People don't really realize, he didn't just come out of nowhere, basicly.
He had a great year. He had a great year, in my opinion, in 2017.
Oh, they dominated. It was great.
Well, we'll have to see what the next one brings out, right? No, and I agree. He's a great guy. He's invited me and a few other bloggers to just kind of hang out in the lab one day, and we kind of had a great time just, going through and tasting random stuff. And so he's definitely very, hospitable and great guy to even talk to, right? So, but with that, let's kind of move on a little bit. So the Travis, you brought up a good question about, how you were able to start tasting and testing and kind of, guiding your way through this. I mean, is there any other way that you can try to figure out which recipes you like the best without trying literally like buying a bottle of every single recipe? Like, is there a way that you can narrow down to something that you can say like, well, I don't have $1,000 to blow on all 10 here. So let's try to narrow it down here. So what's the ability to make that happen?
I mean, I know Facebook.
That's a good question.
I mean, you got to trade samples or buy samples. I mean, I started out on Instagram before I was on Facebook and trading samples and trying stuff. Yeah, buying bottle splits. Do them locally. When I first got into this, I lived in the middle of nowhere. I didn't have guys around me to split bottles with. But I mean, if you live in a big city or you got a group of guys, split the bottle. and so there's a few different ways, and worst case, you can always blend it with more Four Roses and it's going to taste good. So
keep blending until it hits the profile that you want.
Blake's got something special going on there.
Oh, geez.
And so I guess it's when you bring up, so that's another good thing that you bring up too, Travis, because you kind of started, I don't know if you started this fad or maybe Blake started, like somebody did, of trying to create your own limited edition small batches with the single barrels that are on the market. So kind of talk about what that is and how it works.
Yeah, that was definitely me. But there's a little bit of a difference. I just did one, really. It was the 2012 small batch. I loved it so much, and I didn't buy any in 2012. I wasn't really into it at that point. And they're $600, $700, $800 on Facebook. So I figured out that all the four components in that I could buy the 17-year-old OBSV, which was expensive. Don't get me wrong. 13-year OBSK on down the line. So I bought those 4 bottles. I found out the ratios from Brent, and then I just mixed them together. It's clearly different. It's 4 single barrels as opposed to a massive vat. But all those barrels that I bought were all, the 17-year OBSV was 17 years old and bottled in 2012. So in my head, it all kind of matched up and made sense. So that one was fun. That's the only one I've really done. But
was it close?
I'll give Blake gets a lot of credit because he made a ton of them. And Brett, you were on that the blind tasting. Like some of those were awesome, man. I mean,
they were the best ones.
Yeah, the couple of them really were. My favorite one was a blend. So yeah, he hasn't matched the ages up to the limited editions, but he's matched the recipes and then blended those together at the right ratio. So it's a little different, but dude, that stuff's so good.
And for anybody that doesn't know, the real magic secret here is his ninja blender or his magic bullet blender, whatever it is. That's so make sure you go check out Blake's YouTube channel and you can kind of see how he kind of fools a lot of people into drinking stuff by essentially putting it in a blender. But
Blakey.
Yeah. But Brett, have you ever tried recreating a lot of these single barrel these limited edition small batch expressions using different kinds of single barrels?
Not once. I'm not going down that road. I know what's ahead of me if I start that. It'll never end. You can I'd buy 100 bottles and I'd be doing that all night. I haven't even been interested in doing that.
Yeah, I mean, other than the 2012, Travis, have you tried other ones that just kind of create your own small batch blend, or are you kind of in a camp of, I don't really want to waste any more single barrels by trying to create blends and who knows what it's going to end up like?
A little bit of both, actually. One that I always recommend to people to start off is the barrel strength small batch. So you take O's, the 2 O's and the 2 K's, and mix those together. I think I'd probably do like 60% K and 40% O. I can't remember exactly what it is, but that's a good one. So you get a barrel strength small batch, like what you would buy at the store, but barrel strength. So I think that's a good one for people to try. I've done that. It's awesome. But as far as limited edition, I've just done too much blending, and I'll never drink all these blends. I mean, when people come over, I'm like, just please drink this. Like, it's too much.
So I've got another question I remind myself to ask it, but you said something that is always piqued my interest, and I've always wanted to ask it before, and this is a great episode to ask it, is why do you don't think that Four Roses has ever put out a small batch barrel proof, just something that is consistently on the shelves? Like, you can get single barrels, you can get small batch proof down, but why not just a regular anywhere between 7 to 10 years small batch blend that's barrel proof?
Yeah, I think part of it is, they don't have enough product to sell anyways. Their business is doing so well. They don't really need a new product. And And I think that the upper management is kind of doesn't really want to get into doing new products like that. They flirted with doing with some 100 proof non-chill filtered. They wanted to do like a special kind of release for that, and they couldn't even really get that done. So I just think that they're fine where they are basically, and that's they kind of just luckily just kind of leave it up to us. We can do it ourselves.
Brent, anything to add on to that?
I think it'd be tough to keep that on the shelf. I mean, if you look
think it would go the way of like Stag Junior or something?
Yeah, or Elijah Craig barrel proof. I don't know that they want. They have enough trouble with the one or two limited editions they put out each year. I don't think they want to mess with another one.
That's a good point too.
Yeah. So there's Travis. You had mentioned something else that kind of piqued my interest as well. So you had mentioned, when you created this, you had to go and source like a 17-year. We've seen some things that have been hidden from the gift shop that are, there's rumors up to 23-year single barrels coming out. And we know that there's not a whole lot of stuff that is going to be that high in age for much longer. But one thing that we have noticed is that when you are looking at single barrel picks that come out regularly, is that the ages have continually been decreasing, exponentially in the past, say 2 years, right? I mean, maybe 3 years. It's been going from 12 years to 10 years. And now we're at like 8.5 is almost like the norm, right? Do you think that they can still keep this pace up, or do they need to just kind of put a bigger halt on the barrel program to let those age a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what their inventory situation is like. I mean, I think that they've probably got 250,000 barrels would be my guess at least. So I think that they're probably fine overall. They only do 600 barrels a year for the program, so it's not a ton. So, I've never really figured out exactly why the ages, quote unquote, dropped. I think that it's another one of those things that's cyclical. You see them now, they're 9, 10, 11 years old. And really the range that they're supposed to allow is 8 to 12. It's not supposed to be below that or above that anyways. So all this, some 13-year-old stuff that came out, usually when it gets to above like 11 or 12, they put it away for limited editions. So I think that another part of it is that in, 2015 or whatever, when they did kind of reset and have these lower ages, people actually started paying attention. So that's like the first thing they noticed and kind of like, oh, why are all these barrels so young when actually they're not? I mean, 8, 9, 10 years old is really when most of the Four Roses is kind of prime, as Brett alluded to that earlier. So I think people just get caught up. It's just the thing nowadays, the label, the age, the proof, all this stuff, when in fact, these barrels are really good.
I agree. I mean, sometimes an 11 or 12-year-old is terrific, and sometimes it's not. And I've had 8 and 9-year-olds that are just perfect. So I don't think you can criticize them for that. And plus, we don't know what they're holding back and for what. Just because they're rolling out 8 and 9-year-old barrels for the barrel pick program, you don't know what they're saving, and that's what's going to be really fun to see.
Yeah, they're saving a lot of old stuff for limited editions and fun things. So I mean, it's not like it's not there. I mean, that Brent, the 14-year OESK, that was a lot of bottles and a lot of barrels and all these limited edition small batches, and the 16-year OBSK in the gift shop, that was only a handful of barrels. But I mean, they're putting out stuff. Al Young's, like, where'd that 23-year-old OBSV come from? I mean, they've got stuff.
Have you ever had, by the way, that, I don't know if you've noticed, Travis noticed this, I'm sure, but a lot of people watching or listening probably don't know that Al Young, if you match that up with the 2014, they're, other than the ages, they're really close to identical. It's kind of fun to watch. I mean, the Al Young is just an older version of the 14. If you really want to try them side by side and see the interplay, it's kind of fun.
I never really noticed that, honestly. And the 2014 is really underappreciated. That bottle just gets better as it goes along. But I haven't really had a 14 in a long time and didn't know that. That's very interesting.
Yeah, there was also, for anybody that is unaware, trying to catch up with episodes, there you can go and check one back out that we did with Brent Elliott, talking about the Al Young release, where we had actually gone and sampled through all the individual bourbons that then went into the blend. So if you want to go back and you can listen to that episode, it was a good one as well. Now, Brett, you had also mentioned you used the word perfect. And we talked about this at the very beginning of the episode of, has there ever been some sort of bottle that you just lose your mind over, that you've just got to find more of it? And, I'll kind of ask you again while we're here on air, has there ever been a Four Roses pick where you're like, you lose your mind? You got to say, like, I've got to have at least 3 or 4 or 5 bottles of this to last it for the next, decade, right? I mean, have you ever found yourself say that to a particular Four Roses pick? Like, not going to say small batch limited releases or anything like that, but just a standard Four Roses pick.
Yeah. But I've got a few of those. So it's some point.
Is it biased because you picked them?
Couple.
Okay.
No,
go figure.
Here's what I've come to realize is the first one I had was amazing. That was the OBSQ. That was incredible. But then I had an OBSV that was amazing. And so when you've had a few of them, and we were talking on air, off air earlier, there's a pick that was done that, 5 people said, you need to try this, I said, okay, fine. I saw the prices of this thing, and I'm like, I'm not paying that for a Four Roses single barrel. There's so many good ones out there. So someone sent me a sample, and I drank it here when we were getting ready to start the show, and I was like, yeah, it's good. But so that's kind of where I fall. Even the best ones are, like I said before, it's perfect. What's perfect to me is that's a great bourbon. But is it something I'm going to go nuts over? No, because I know that there's so many picks being done, that there's great picks coming, and I know I'll get bottles of those. So I'm not going to go crazy chasing any of these down because it has a reputation. And that's the first thing I get scared of when something gets hype around it. And then I really, unless I'm on the other side of that, of course, but I usually just, I get excited about it. That's cool. If I get one, great. What's more fun is if someone comes in town and has it with them and pours it for me. That's usually when I enjoy it the most, is when I'm with somebody else anyway. But there's just so many good ones out there. So the long answer to your short question is, there are some that I remember more than others, but nothing that I would lose an arm and leg over.
What about you, Travis? Somebody that's, let's not put like the ones that you've picked into the equation here. Everybody's got this thing that says like, oh, it's my baby. Like, I want to have plenty of these, right? You've named, for anybody that doesn't know, why do you name it the captain's pick?
Can you see him over here?
So anybody that doesn't, it's his dog. So he's got this relationship. So, other than saying, the captain's pick or your babies, like, are there any of those like Four Roses single barrel picks out there that you've said, like, this is amazing, I've never had anything like this?
I don't know about I've never had anything like this, but pretty much on like a monthly basis, I find a barrel, I'm like, this is amazing, I need at least 3 of them. So the point there though is that it always happens. So I don't know if I'm just kind of just that obsessed with it, but I mean, if you really like it, something, and this is a big lesson for everybody, not just with Four Roses, but there's always another bottle. Like, you don't need to freak out about something because there's always going to be something else. So yeah, I've loaded up on barrels before, especially back in 2014 when there was some just incredible OBSK, OBSV, like every recipe was just amazing back then. Some great runs. Like, yeah, I mean, I've got multiples of a lot of different barrels because they really are just that good. And I mean, still haven't even found some recipes that were that good to this day. So yeah, the answer is absolutely yes.
And until Travis just walks away from the game, some of those he's never going to get to because he's always getting new ones that are exciting. And that's the problem with a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, I'll hold on to a bottle of whatever barrel for, 2 years. And then all of a sudden I'm picking a barrel and I'm buying, 4 or 5 bottles. I'm like, well, I can't just keep adding. Like, so I'll sell a bottle or 2 or 3 that I've held on for 2 years. And I'm like, on to the next one.
Oh yeah, believe me, I think a lot of us have could be in your seat as well. I think especially being here in Kentucky as well. There's at least a single barrel Four Roses somewhere in the city of Louisville at any time. So it's not like it's slim pickings, but I think that's the good thing about the program is that it is accessible. You do have access to it, anywhere, and it's at a pretty good price no matter what. It's nothing that's going to be asinine.
Can I ask a question, Kenny?
This is my show, Brett. I'm the one. No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
It's a question I've had that I never asked, but Travis may have the answer. So I've read about all these great runs, right? So people look at on the bottle, people probably know it'll say like ME, for example, we talked about earlier. It's, the M warehouse on the east side and the rack and so I'm in packaging. So, we sell bottles and things like that. And, the manufacturers will put a laser code or a pallet tag to identify where, what a particular production run went. So if there's a quality issue, you can go back and trace it. And I've always wondered, the bourbon geeks out there are like, I've had people even message me, oh my God, do you have any Fs from this run and this rack and this tier? And, I guess my question is, do you think that those tags are on the bottle for the bourbon geeks, or is it for the distillery in case there's something wrong or something is off that they can go back and trace it to that particular spot in the warehouse?
I'll give my answer first and I'll let Travis go. I think it's a sign of inefficiency because you want to make something that's handcrafted and labeled and stands out from a packaging standpoint when you're looking at it on the shelf, right? I mean, you see it, in cursive, you see the name, you see whatever it is. And I think from a consumer standpoint that's what maybe attracts you. I think what you were saying are just adverse effects of it, but I'll let Travis give his opinion too.
They do have laser codes on the bottles. So I think, look at every other distillery that does single barrels. They don't necessarily mark the barrel. Well, I guess a lot of them do, but that detailed of information, I think just Four Roses' attempt at being very transparent, which they're probably the most transparent of the big distilleries. So I really think it's just making it personal to the picked it or the group or store or whatever. They just want all the information on there. I don't think that necessarily. It does help if you want to email Mandy and be like, hey, I got this, here's the barrel information. She can tell you everything about it. But don't email Mandy. She's going to be mad that everybody emails. But no,
just don't say her email out here. It'll be fine.
Right. But no, they do laser code them. So, I don't think that it's about like, if there's an issue, they have to use the labels to track it down.
I don't know. Brett, you have any other follow-up questions for that?
No.
No? All right. Good. If you want to host sometime, just let me know, buddy. We'll make it happen.
I'm just making myself at home.
Yeah, he needs
for my last guest appearance that I'm asked to be here.
No, it's quite all right. That's awesome. So, got kind of two more questions to kind of wrap this up. One we kind of touched on a little bit when we had talked about the Al Young 50th and looking at each one of the barrels that went into the blend. And, there's been some things that have come out in the gift shop in the past few months that have been extremely high in the age range of, between 17 and 23 years and stuff like that. I'll kind of get your all's opinion. When it comes to Four Roses, and from a single barrel standpoint, because I know you guys have had some of these that are in the higher ranges, do you really think that time in the oak actually makes it better? Or do you think it's more or less they really want it because it's got a high age statement on it?
So I think a lot of the hype about it is the higher age statement. It's just like any other sticker or label or whatever. It's just something for people to get excited about. For me personally, I just prefer that oakier flavor. I'll drink any Four Roses. I do love the 2013 single barrel. It's 13-year OBSK. I've drank through, I can't even count how many. I just love that kind of oaky flavor. I think they wouldn't release it if it wasn't, aged right and wasn't good products. So they are all really good. There's that. But for me, I don't get too caught up. I'll drink an 8-year-old or 7-year-old Four Roses, right next to a 17-year-old. I think they're all just really good. And I'm able to buy them, at cost now, which helps a lot. But I think a majority of people that don't really drink Four Roses and kind of get caught up in that, it's definitely just a number that they're after.
I think most of those people aren't opening the bottle. It's rare to see like the one that came out in the gift shop, the 16-year. most of the people that bought that, it's, oh my God, there's a 16-year single barrel. Like, it's not common, but I think like anything else, it's taste. Do you like it or not? You know, Travis likes the older ones. I tend to like the older ones, but I also like some of the younger ones. I think it's different for each. The lesson is you got to taste it, and don't marry yourself to, it's got to be this old or it's got to be this recipe. I think you have to try it and decide which, you know, they all stand on their own.
Yeah. So 2 quick points to that. We had Lauren Simpson's big charity blind tasting, and in my group there was probably 20 of us or something number like that. And the 16-year OBSK and 17-year-old OBSV were in there blind, and I don't think either of them finished in the top 3. So that was a little surprising. And then the 16-year OBSK, I'm obsessed with that. I absolutely love it. But I take it around to tastings a lot of times, and a lot of guys just don't like it. It's too minty. They just don't like it. So, you know, that's good for me. Keep them away. But it's just your palate. What do you prefer? I like them a little older. But also, like I said, I have some 2-year-old OBSV in here that's just absolutely awesome. So, you know, it just depends on the barrel.
I'd love to try that. I think the one thing to remember here is, and we go back to it all the time, there's no best bourbon that can actually be crowned by anybody. I think it's, what do you like to drink and what do you enjoy? And like Travis just said, I mean, that may be one of his favorite bourbons on earth. And just because other people don't like it, you know, there are people who love it. And thankfully they offer enough variation in those 10 recipes. They have something for everybody. You can find it.
And so the last question I'll kind of throw, this was coming from Michael Urato. He said he wants to hear your opinions regarding the rumor mutated V yeast that was said to be used in the 2012, 2013 one.
Oh, I'm so glad he asked that, Travis. You were there with me when Jim told that story.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm still trying to process all of this, because there's 2 different runs of 17-year-old OBSV. I mean, there was some that came out in 2010, and then of course it came out in 2012 and 2013. So I wouldn't guess that the 2010 stuff was mutated. I really don't know, but it's hard to pin Jim down on that. But yeah, I mean, for sure that the 17-year-old OBSV in the 2012 and 2013, I mean, that yeast mutated, and unfortunately they didn't save a sample of it, so they can't recreate it.
But that single barrel was used in some of the best limited editions after that, right? Isn't that the whole? That was the amazing story. They just didn't save it.
Yeah, yeah. They almost didn't even distill it and age it. I guess it was probably Jim that was like, "Oh, let's see what it has."
What a great call!
Most of the good things at Four Roses are because of Jim and certain people. But I mean, he kind of succeeded despite the upper management. I guess that's kind of as PC as I can put it.
So you think the mutated yeast is kind of what made those runs? I'm saying it right. Made those runs special.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it was just probably one. It was probably 2 mashes, you know, distilled to create probably 250 barrels. I mean, that was it. That's a run, is, you know, 230 barrels. So I think it was just one run. It was probably the end of the season or something like that. And so there wasn't a ton of it, but yeah, I mean, it stretches, you know, through the gift shop. There was 12 barrels or something like that. And then in the 2012 and 2013 limited editions. So
what was the single barrel that had that? There was a single barrel, right? That it was a limited anniversary bottle that had just that.
That's what I'm saying, though. That was in 2010. So there was 2 different runs of 17-year-old OBSV, and I don't think that that original run was mutated yeast. This is where I don't know. As much as I talk about this, I still don't know the answer to that, but I'm fairly certain it's the stuff that ended up in the 2012 and 2013. That was the mutated yeast, but there was another one before that. So it kind of, and that stuff's really good. So it kind of takes away from the mutated yeast to me a little bit. Like, you know, that was good, but I don't think it was like something totally crazy special.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that makes sense.
I think you've probably hit some key heartstrings of those really bourbon nerds out there. And then some people were like, I thought we were just talking about 10 recipes. You're telling me there's 11 now or something, right? So
yeah, I mean, it's the same
Yeah.
yeast, but it just kind of mutated and it was like way more complex. So that was a one-time thing. Probably actually technically should have just been dumped and not even aged. I mean, the way that things work, but luckily they decided to keep it.
Shit was cheap back then, so who cared?
Right. Yeah, and that's why
All right.
Rutledge is the man.
Yeah, right. I know. He made a few good calls, I think, in his day. So you got to give him accolades for that. So last thing, as Brett had talked about earlier, has the ME warehouse fad, has that passed? When everybody was wanting that, is there a new fad that everybody wants right now?
Well, the ME thing is done, but the spirit is alive. I mean, that's the way I buy picks. If I'm not picking the barrel, that's the way I buy them. They definitely have these distillation runs. A chunk of the barrels will all age right next to each other in the same warehouse, same rack, same tier, all that stuff. So you'll see them. There was the TS OESVs, the PS, the OESQ that aged in the MW warehouse. I mean, there's just been a bunch of them over the years. At the same time that OBSV ME run was going on, there was OBSK QS and OESOBN. I mean, it's not ME. It's just that's a good way to find barrels that are similar. So like if you find one that you like, you can look on the spreadsheet I made or email Four Roses and, find something that aged very close, was distilled on the same day, same age, age right in the same spot. Of course, they're all single barrels, so it's not going to be exactly the same, but I feel like that's the best, most educated guess you can make is going by the run.
Brett, have you seen any fads or trends? And then we'll kind of end it on that.
I try not to buy too much into those. I know that people stick to them, but I just feel like sometimes they can be, same tier, just a little bit over and be very different to me. So, I'll generally, buying a pick for me, I'll generally go off of somebody I trust. And most of the time it'll be something I like. Sometimes it won't be, but that's a lot of work to do that. But yeah, I think if you find something you really, really like and you can't get another bottle of it, I guess try and find the closest thing.
Well, I appreciate all your answers, but you're all wrong. It's actually based on stickers now. So
all stickers. I'm so over stickers. I'm done with them.
We'll save that for a different day. But fellas, I want to say thanks again for coming on the show tonight and talking about, your recipe or talking about Four Roses recipes and your thoughts and sort of some of the mentality that goes into it as well. So before we sign off, I want to give you all an opportunity just to say again who you are, and if people want to get in contact with you, if they want to know about some random spreadsheet that exists, like Travis, like how do you find that? So Travis, I'll let you go first.
I honestly don't even know besides Facebook. In the groups, I have a Four Roses group, Taste the Four Roses. There's about 2,000 or more people in there. That's a good way to start. But I'm really only on Facebook. I don't use Twitter or much else. But Travis Hill, you can find me. Hopefully we have mutual friends on Facebook, but that's where I'm at. So feel free to reach out. Happy to talk. I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Brett Atlas. bourbonbanter.com. Bourbon and Banter, good blog, good group. And I'm on Facebook too. I spend way too much time talking to some of you out there, but it's fun. I met some really fun people that way.
It seems that's we all just kind of get sucked into the spiral of Facebook nowadays. I have to put a 2018 goal list together. It says focus more on work, less time on Facebook forums. Fellas, I want to say thank you again for coming on tonight. It was a pleasure talking to you, especially about this. Make sure that everybody that's out there listening, you do follow these guys, try to learn more about it. Go out there and buy a few different recipes, try them side by side, do some bottle splits, find people to swap samples with, whatever it is. And you too can one day come on the show and give your recipes and thoughts as well. But with that, make sure you're following us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Bourbon Pursuit. If you do like the show, make sure you support us on Patreon, patreon.com/Bourbon Pursuit, because as you had heard, we heard some questions from our audience that was listening to us live, and that is one of the perks of being a Patreon member. So if you want to watch these and as they're happening live and be a part of the show, make sure you go and you support us there as well. With that, if you have any show suggestions, you want to send us an email, please do so. It's theduo, THEDUO @bourbonpursuit.com. Fellas, thanks again, and we will see everybody next week.